Hi, everyone. Hi, I'm Lisa Nicole. I'm going to stand a little bit away from that. I'm Lisa Nicole. I'm Associate Dean for Research and Public Services here at Swim Library. And we're so happy you've joined us here today on this beautiful spring day. I was saying I always know when spring is here when we all go visit the baby lambs in Colonial Williamsburg. I got to see 2 of them today, and they are adorable. So again, thanks for joining us for artist, author, activist Katie Holten and the Language of Trees, Forest Thinking to Reimagine the World. This event is part of the Institute for Integrative Conservation's 2024-25 speaker series, Creativity and Innovation in Conservation. And it's presented in collaboration with W&M Libraries, with support from the Muscarelle Museum of Art in celebration of W&M Year of the Environment. I'll start with our land acknowledgement. So W&M acknowledges the indigenous people who are the original inhabitants of the lands our campus is on today. The Chernahaka, Nottoway, Chickahominy, Eastern Chickahominy, Mattaponi, Monacan, Nansemond, Nottoway, Pamunkey, Patawomac, Upper Mattaponi, and Rappahannock tribes, and we pay our respect to their tribal members past and present. So Katie Holten is an activist, an artist, and a best-selling author. For over 20 years, she's made unconventional works that intersect art, activism, ecology, language, and history. At the root of her practice is a commitment to fighting climate and biodiversity emergency. Her collaborative research-based work explores the inextricable relationship between humans and nature, between organic systems and human-made systems. In 2003, she represented Ireland at the Venice Biennale. She's had solo exhibitions at the Bronx Museum of Art, the Nevada Museum of Art, the New Orleans Museum of Art, Contemporary Art Museum in St. Louis, and the Dublin City Gallery, the Hugh Lane. Her work investigates the entangled relationships between humans and the natural world. She's created tree alphabets, a stone alphabet, and a wildflower alphabet to share the joy she finds in the love of more than human world. Her work has appeared in The New Yorker, The New York Times, The Irish Times, The Washington Post, Art Forum, and Frieze, and she is a visiting lecturer at the New School of the Anthropocene. And if she could be a tree, she would be an oak. Thank you.
Hope you can hear me. Does the sound okay for everyone in the back? I'm so grateful to be here. Thank you, Anita, for the invitation. It's really, it feels beautiful. We had a tree drawing session this morning. So I've been outside all day under the trees, and it's a real treat to be here with all of you. So I look forward to having questions and answers later on. So please stop me and we'll have a conversation after I give you a little introduction to some of my work with the trees. One reason it's really lovely to be here is I just realized as Lisa was giving the introduction, 20 years, which I used to think, oh my God, 20 years, that's a really long time. And now I'm like, 20 years, but it feels like the last 2 months is like 100 years. So time is very much a flexible thing. And time is also a recurring topic in my book, The Language of Trees. I talk a lot about tree time. So I think I'll come back to time and how we think about it during the conversation. But I think I can't really talk about the work that I'm doing now, which is the work with the tree alphabets and the language of trees, without giving you a little bit of an introduction to who I am as a human being, which I'm very much rooted in Ireland. So this is the bog photograph that I took from a bog awareness series, way back in the 90s, 1997, 98. I spent a lot of time in the bog, which is like a wetland. This is some of the sphagnum moss and the carnivorous sundew, which Charles Darwin wrote about sundews. And I'll talk, in a little more recent work, I've gone back to the bog. Everything is cyclical, right? So I've gone, now that I'm an older lady, like middle-aged, I've gone back to where I spent a lot of my childhood and started revisiting the bog and realizing just how important it is to me and to my community and to our species in a way. So a lot of my work happens outside. So that's why today is really special, because my natural habitat is being outside. A lot of my works, this was me in Belfast in Northern Ireland, weeding, transplanting weeds. My mum was a gardener, my dad was a mathematician, worked with numbers. So those two things really inform all of the work that I do, this combination of man-made systems, the mathematics, and the organic systems, the plants, and the cyclical, seasonal way that the world works. So I went for a lot of walks, I collected plants, transplanted them, sometimes took them to other parts of the city, brought them inside into galleries. This was a collaborative work with Helen O'Leary, another Irish artist, at the Serious Art Centre in Cove in Cork, in the south of Ireland. And it's kind of, I think a lot of this work was, for me, about trying to understand what it is to make artworks if you're a person who's trying to understand the world. That doesn't really make sense what I just said. But I studied painting. There might be some art students here. So for art students, maybe you had the experience I had where you're in a studio and you've got the blank canvas and paint and you have to make art. And that was my situation, and that's not who I am, and it's not how I work. But it took me a long time to realize that. I went to Berlin, went to school there, and realized that just living my life, having conversations, being outside in the world, researching, a conversation would lead me to trying to understand how something worked, and that would lead me to another person and another conversation. And then the work would kind of make itself apparent to me and what I needed to do next. So all of my work is research-based, and that's what this piece, which I call 137.5 degrees, which is the angle. In flowering plants, you have the main stem, and then the branches, in most flowering plants, they come out at the same angle, which is 137.5 degrees. So it's like these universal laws in a way that kind of underlie. This is where it's related to what my dad was doing with the numbers and trying to figure out how things are connected to other things and how do things work. Like when you break a stick of spaghetti, Richard Feynman, the physicist, he calculated like they always break in two or three pieces. So you have two and then one in the middle. And so he would work the numbers and figure out how and why that happened. And I always wanted to be able to do things like that, to say, why is this working the way it does? But my brain didn't really work that way with the numbers, so I would end up making things like this, which is essentially crocheted. So it's yarn or wool, and this was a gallery in Dublin. So each of those separate pieces, they're all individual pieces, were made as I was traveling. So it was like my carbon footprint. But this was back in 2001, I think. So it was kind of the very beginning of using this term carbon footprint. And a lot of the work, I showed the Bob photograph at the beginning, was essentially me trying to be in relationship with where I was and understand where am I and how do I relate to the place that I'm in, which is often through other people. So that's where I keep using this word conversation, because a lot of it happens through conversations. But also just through walking and looking. That's why the tree drawing session was so nice, because you just take time to sit and look. Maybe make a mark on a piece of paper, maybe not. But trying to be in relationship with where you are, and that can scale all the way up to the entire planet. So in a lot of projects I've done, they might start with a very specific place. So for example, this is Venice, for the Venice Biennale in 2003. I created a kind of a living laboratory in this old Scuola community center space, turned it into a library, made booklets. I've always liked making printed matter, sharing some of my drawings and the research notes. So I mentioned that I love research. I feel like my work is research in a way. I work with a lot of scientists, trying to understand how things work. The bottom, as you look at it, the bottom left photograph shows one of the bridges in Venice, but covered in weeds. So I went for weed walks with the botanist, the city's botanist, who told me about the fact that these weeds are moving. So some of them, she pointed out some of them that weren't there 10 years before, but because the climate is changing and the plants are moving north. As soon as she said that, I thought, oh, I'm going to have to come back in 10 years to see the new plants and the new weeds and how it's changing. And I did. I went back 10 years later and revisited the project. So again, that's another way of thinking about time, how you do a project for a specific place at a certain time. That was for 2003. But I didn't feel in any way like that was the end of the project. It didn't end then, especially with the booklets too that people take away for free. Everybody's invited to do what they want with the work, so the work continues to grow in other forms. This was visiting the Herbarium in Venice's. This was actually 10 years later when we went to the Herbarium, and I found some of the archives were from 10 years earlier, specimens that were collected by the botanist I had walked with in the area where we had been walking. And also I like this because you can see how the specimens kind of mirror the maps. This is one of my map drawings of a city. And so this is another thing that's maybe related to my dad's work, with how the growth patterns of cities, right? So these are recurring things that appear over and over and over again in my work over the years, but that I'm so fascinated with how humans, how we come together and grow, right? Our cities, this is one of my drawings of Dublin, drawn from memory, the city, the river, Liffey, from my walks. Before I got COVID and long COVID, I used to walk all the time, all day, every day. But you see how they sort of mirror the same kind of patterns, of growth patterns. In this series of images, I didn't include the map of London, but over centuries, you see how London started. It's also the same with Amsterdam. If you look at historical records of how those cities grow, they grow out kind of as if you have a petri dish and you have the bacteria, and then over time the growth explodes. It's the same with our cities, are the same way. So our species, humans, are just another entity on the planet growing, and we grow in the same, almost the same way. So this is a large tree that I constructed with the help of the team at the Contemporary Art Museum in St. Louis from recycled material. It was kind of based on these tree drawings that I started making when I moved to New York 20 years ago, was that 20 years ago? 2004. For a 1-year research, a Fulbright research into our relationship with nature in the city. And 20 years later, I'm still doing that work. But the tree drawings were of individual city street trees, and in a way led to the book and the language of trees and the tree alphabets. But this tree was made from recycled materials left over from the exhibitions before mine, and the staff, the team, construction team helped me tie it together with black duct tape, wire, other bits of trash. And it was interesting because I always see my drawings as being almost three-dimensional and existing in space, never just being a dead mark on a piece of paper. They always have this life to them. So it was interesting to start making things like this where they actually were in 3 dimensions and you could walk around them and be with them in the space. Then I made something that was even more 3-dimensional, a tree museum for the Bronx, for the Grand Concourse up in the Bronx. This is a photo, it's 4.5 mile long boulevard, massive. I had only been to the Bronx once for a Yankees game, so when they commissioned me to make the piece, I said, I don't know anything about the Bronx. They said, that's fine, that's kind of a bonus, because when you're new, when you don't know a place, you have these fresh, clear eyes, and you can see. And so I spent maybe a year up in the Bronx, walking in conversation with a lot of people. This project was all about people. And I think basically all of the work that I do comes back to people and humans, even though I end up, for years I was called the weed lady because I worked with weeds, and I was called the tree lady. But all of this is in conversation with the people and the humans around us. So the Tree Museum essentially mapped 100 trees because the project was to celebrate 100 years of the Grand Concourse. And 100 years isn't that long, right? In the scheme of things, that's like no time at all. But to celebrate 100 years of this street, I used the street trees to tell the story. So it was like an audio guide. You could listen in on your phone or use a computer to hear these 100 trees. They all each told a story narrated by different people, kids or older people, all telling different kinds of stories related somehow to trees or to the community, to that particular spot. And then I got to go into classrooms and take kids out. So kind of like today when we were outside, this was us in Joyce Kilmer Park with students, and it was the most amazing thing to see kids who are never allowed outside. That's, they're not allowed outside the classroom, and to walk into the park, it was really powerful and it was beautiful, and we made some haikus together. We went on haiku hikes, and I found that really really moving. And I said powerful. It was powerful for me and for the poet and the artist who worked with me on it, but for the students, you could almost hear their brains clicking, like they realized just to be outside and to listen and to write and to pay attention. It sort of changes how you see the world, and it's just simple things. But this was a book project. I've worked with a lot of books. I created a whole history of the universe through a collection of books, maps. This is the planet. You can't really get a sense of scale, but it was 8 feet tall, globe, papier-mâché, hand-drawn from memory, map of the world, and a series of plates. I had this fantasy that we could have a communal meal, all of the humans on the planet together, sharing a meal, and that we have plates so that shows the tectonic plates of the planet, how they moved over hundreds of millions of years. And these are just a few of the plates that I drew. So they're hand-drawn with Nicholas Moss pottery. So it would be like an infinite meal with an infinite, well, not infinite, because there's a lot of us. And I think a lot of things could be solved if we could all come together and share a meal and have a conversation and realize that it's not all. I just had this image of people like throwing the plates against the wall, which could be cathartic. And then this was another pottery piece, Branch Like Adams, which was a quote from Lucretius on the nature of things. This was for a public art project I did in the city of Dublin. There were a whole series of these that I made on a trail. And it was interesting because you could never do something like this in New York because the scale of the city is so different. They're only 4-inch square tiles, kind of like large Scrabble pieces. And if you tried to create something like that in New York, it would be invisible, nobody would notice. But in Dublin, they were very, very visible. It was kind of beautiful. I thought to revisit, do something else with this. And then, so I mentioned conversations a lot. A lot of these works do happen through conversation, and we sort of structured that. Me and my partner Dylan said we're having a lot of dead-end conversations, the two of us. I like cooking, so I cook meals. We have these conversations. How are we going to deal with this, the climate and the biodiversity crisis, all the shit that is hitting the fan, we're in this terrible place. I've been having these conversations forever and ever and ever. And Dylan said, we need to invite more people to the table, to the conversations, because the two of us are not going to solve them. And so on Sunday afternoons, we started a series of Sunday salons. So I made carrot cake, we'd have tea and coffee, 16 people were invited because we had 16 chairs around the table, and we thought it was very important that everybody had a seat at the table, we could all make eye contact, and that we could all hear each other when we spoke, rather than having a lecture like this, where I'm sitting speaking at all of you. And so we did this starting in 2014, Sunday salons on different aspects of the Anthropocene. This was from the first one with Royce Granton, who's at the back left. Roy had written an op-ed in the New York Times called "Learning to Die in the Anthropocene." He's since graduated from, I think it was Princeton, English, but he was a soldier in Iraq, and he wrote about his experience of waking up in the morning, putting on his uniform. You look in the mirror and think, well, today this could be the day that I die, and that the seriousness of that and having to live with that. And also because he was a writer himself, he processed it and realized after he left the war zone and went home, then Katrina happened, and he realized as a species, this is where we're at. We're having to realize that we are basically facing the end times. So this was where we began our conversations. It was very dark, but really fruitful. It was very beautiful thing to do, to come together every Sunday, well, one Sunday every month. They were monthly. And the Sunday salons, I think, directly led to the tree alphabet, because at each of these conversations we kept coming back to storytelling. It was like the realization that we need to be able to have a story that we all share, because we are all humans, this species. We've forgotten a lot of our stories. I'm Irish, so we've forgotten our Irish stories, our Irish language. Some of these things have been beaten out of us. It was done very purposefully by colonizers. We've forgotten fundamental things, like in Ireland we forgot that the natural habitat on the west coast is temperate rainforest. So Irish Atlantic rainforest is something we've only realized in the last few years. Like, how can you forget something as fundamental as what your actual land is? And so this forgetting, also creation stories, and myths and fairies, which are very important, in Ireland, but a lot of that was also beaten out of us or not taught at school. We're told it's not important or it's silly or frivolous. These are actually very important, fundamental aspects of what makes you, your understanding with the place where you're growing up. And so this remembering and revisiting through stories, we realized, again, because that was 2014 when we started these Sunday salons, and so over the next 2-3 years, we realized this, because we kept, like I said, we kept coming back to storytelling. It's so important. The seed was planted in me immediately. I realized, okay, I'm not a writer, I can't write, but okay, I'm a visual artist, so maybe I can play with the molecules of storytelling and like the atoms of language, which for me is the alphabet, the Latin alphabet, 26 little letters. And so I went in and started playing around with the letters and transformed them into trees. And so I made tree drawings for each letter and scanned the drawings, worked with the designer, and we replaced each letter of the ABC with a drawing and then made a font. So you can download the font and you can write with trees. So it's literally playing with storytelling and rewriting and reimagining and reforesting and all these, the wording of everything. But not in the way that we had talked about in our salons. We weren't talking about this kind of way of playing with storytelling. But this was the way that I could do it. And for me it was about slowing down as well, because when you read in translation, because essentially that's what's in the book. Like everything in the book is in English and the facing page is translated into trees. And translation is slow. Your brain has to pause and go slowly. Sometimes it's, the translation is letter by letter, tree by tree, and you can translate it. Other times it's more dense, it's an impenetrable forest. But this act of just slowing down is a big part. I realize this is like a huge part of the work that I do. And so I used that tree alphabet to make this book about trees, which turned into this book, because this book was a limited edition, 500 copies. It sold out. Before we went to print, we realized immediately that there was an appetite and a need for this book. it seemed to like kind of hit a nerve in a good way. So this is one of the pieces where you can see letter by letter, tree by tree, Zadie Smith saying birds singing the wrong tunes in the wrong trees too early in the year. And then this is one of the longer essays, and the white spaces show the paragraph breaks because of the formatting. It mirrors how it was formatted, so it becomes impenetrable. So it's playing with all these different ways of understanding language, translating. Tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? That's the beginning of the tree alphabet. Then I started thinking about playing, like going deeper into kind of exploding the alphabet or language. So working on a stone alphabet, which became an infinite alphabet. So each mark for A would not be the same each time. This was in Cassis in the south of France, where they have this incredible karst landscape, which we have in Ireland, the Burren. It's not as dramatic as this, but I spent a lot of time, I worked with geologists, studying the lines and the cracks, because each line and each crack tells you something. If you have the right, we talked about how if you have the right goggles, you can understand and read what the earth is saying, what the stones are saying. And I don't know if you all know Emergence magazine. If you don't, you're in for a treat. You get to discover it. They have a printed magazine, but they also exist online. So I've worked with them from the beginning. They shared one of my stone alphabet notebooks, so you can read through the entire notebook. And it was a way to kind of think, okay, if you, for example, with the ABC, with the tree alphabet, when you type, you know exactly what's going to appear, which tree, because it's always the same. But the thinking with the stone alphabet is it'll be different each time, and there's no way to know. And it's an algorithm that does it. I never had time or the finances to work with a designer to make it happen, so it only exists in my mind. But I do think there are more ways to play with language. Anyway, back to the tree alphabets. When we made the book about trees and made the first tree alphabet, we realized they could be place-based. So you could make a tree alphabet for Williamsburg, Virginia, and you could use it as a planting guide to plant messages with trees. So the Parks Department at the time, Grant Gunther was the head of Parks and Forestry, and he invited me to work with them. I was an artist in residence. We made a New York City tree alphabet, and the idea was we were going to plant people's messages with trees. That didn't happen, it hasn't happened yet. It's very complicated in New York to plant. But essentially it is a planting palette, and you have the A to Z of the New York City trees. Very political. We could spend days talking about each tree and why it was chosen. We were talking a little bit at lunch, like the fact that the A is an ash tree. We spent like 6 months back and forth. Could it be an ash tree because of the emerald ash borer beetle has decimated ash trees? So it's and it was interesting because parks, this project, even though it was very playful and fun, and that was one reason I used the lime green and the large letters, thinking about kids, like how do you make it accessible for families? People use the tree alphabets to teach kids, young kids, older kids, much older kids, how to identify trees and learn trees. So it's a learning through play is very important, but they're very serious topics. And the Parks Department was a way to talk about climate change, issues that they technically can't talk about, native and non-native trees. So using play as a way to learn, I think, is a really, really untapped. We need to do more of this, having tree schools, forest schools. This was a tree school I worked on with Sholene O'Sullivan in Dublin, where we took little people, and of course there were old people, but the little people look better in the photos. And we created our tree school, which was outside, like trees. I overheard Lynn mentioning hugging trees. I totally forgot when we were out at the tree drawing session. Usually when I'm on my own and I'm doing something with the tree, I'll go up and I'll address the tree and I'll put a hand on the tree and just introduce myself and say thank you. And I didn't think to do any of that today because I was sitting down. The long COVID makes it very difficult for me to stand upright like a tree. It's ironic. And it affects my brain, so my brain's not thinking. And then this was school striking with Greta Thunberg outside the UN in New York in September of 2019. So the politics of all of this is all intertwined, right? All of this work is political because I think everything that we do is political. You're telling stories, you're investigating, you're trying to understand how things work, how things are connected. And then this is Friends of Ardee Bog. So I showed at the very beginning the photograph from the bog. This is where I grew up. Ardee is on the east coast. We have the most easterly bog. It's a raised bog. Very unusual that it's on the east coast of Ireland. But the Irish government wants to build a road through the bog, which makes no sense. This is what it looks like. It's wet. That's what makes bogs bogs. But they illegally installed, I don't think this has a, oh yeah, this is a fence, and that's another fence that they illegally installed, and you see, so the in-between part is where the road is going to go. And our house is there somewhere. So this is home, and for all of my neighbours who live nearby, I was very upset and confused decades ago when the plans for this road were popped up. None of us could understand why would you put a road here. Of course it's all political. It turns out where the actual road, the bypass, is supposed to go, there's a farmer who's connected to the politicians, but he has more money, so he just paid so that the actual road bypass isn't going there. And they're just going to put it here because with a brown blob on the map, because these were, bogs are thought of as dead spaces. There's nothing there. There's no there. So they just got a line. And I don't have the map here, but they literally got a ruler and a pencil and drew a straight line and said, we're going to put the road there. So that's the difference between, politicians in the big city, so in Dublin, and when you're actually on the ground and you live there locally. So people talk about NIMBYism, not in my backyard, and people just going, no, don't put it here. But in many instances, the reasons people object is because they know what the here is, and that it happens a lot with wind turbines too. People object, you can't put wind turbines because they also put them on bogs, and then they wash away and disappear. Anyway, so I created Friends of Ardee Bog with one other neighbour, and the rest is history. We're now in a court battle with the government, the Irish government. This is us outside the government buildings. We met one of the ministers, Malcolm Noonan, who's been a big supporter. He actually does love and appreciate and understand bogs. But this is the members of Friends of Ardee Bog. This is Anne, who's been super active, really great. But we used the curlew. I used the curlew to make the logo for Friends of Ardee Bog because we have curlews in Ardee Bog and they're on the red list. They're about to go extinct within possibly 5 years. There will be no more Irish curlew. But we have them in Ardee Bog. And yes, none of this makes sense. It just makes you so mad, angry. And so all of us realized we're all neighbors. None of us had ever met each other before, which is kind of crazy because in Ireland most people know everybody. But we found each other, and each of us had been angry on their own, angry and confused and trying to get information about what was happening. Then we found each other, we made this group, and now suddenly we are a powerful entity. So the reason I show this, even though it's far away in Ardee and it's about a bog, I think it's helpful for other people to see, I'm upset about some issue, could be about a tree or anything that's happening in your community. somebody else is also upset about what's happening. You find that other person, you come together, it's happening with the indivisible groups, it's the same thing, you come together, and because you have the local experience and you have the knowledge that, again, is connected to the storytelling, because we're doing a whole series of oral histories, recording people's stories from the community, and then it creates this whole universe of wonderful stuff. Like we've got all of these, apart from having great curly costumes, we've got all this information about the local species and habitats. We can share that with the library, we can have conversations, have a bog festival, bring in people from all across the country to share their knowledge. And then the rights of nature, which is something that I've been heartily trying to campaign for and help, because I think this is one way humans can really make a difference, because we have to change law. I'm not interested in getting involved in politics, but I really think because our species, this is how we work with the law, we've got to somehow create a rights of nature so that non-human beings have rights, companies have rights, so why don't trees and forests and rivers and lakes? So this was just before COVID. I was here with, that's Forrest Gander, a poet, and that's the roots of a redwood tree. This was in Northern California. Emergence magazine invited us to come together. And we made this project called Forest, which ended up becoming the cover of the book. Forrest wrote a poem, I translated it, created a forest alphabet. I love this image because on this tree, which is like enormous, bigger than this building, you can see how the bark spirals, like the turning of the plant. And so on the Emergence website, you can see how this drawing started off with just a few letters with the F-O-R-E-S-T, the beginning of Forrest's poem. Then I made an Irish tree alphabet. This was during COVID and the lockdown. I was actually supposed to be in Ireland for 6 months, making this work collaboratively in community with people. That all changed, the way everything changed, but we made it anyway. In Ireland we have what's called a tree alphabet. There you can see some of the ABC. I was hoping that we could have a font with the 4 seasons so that it would change. We'd have winter, spring, summer, autumn. This is some shots of when the gallery opened in the summer of 2020. Somehow we opened. You could only have like 3 or 4 people at a time, even though the space is enormous. It's actually the largest space in Ireland, visual art space. So this is the OM here at the bottom. So the OM is what's called an Irish tree alphabet. It's from like the 5th or 8th century. It not imitates, but to me it reads like people, the humans were writing using the main stem of the way plants do, and then these branches come out, and that's how they were communicating and creating their letters, almost mirroring how plants are growing and communicating. And so they used these. We think now that many of the letters were named after trees. That's why it's called the tree alphabet. And then up above was my showing how it works. So that, for example, this word today, here's T-O-D-A-Y. So that's how they wrote from the ground up, the way a tree or a plant grows from the ground up. So instead of our writing, which goes, we go left, right. Other cultures, they go other ways. But back then, they went from the ground up, the way plants do. So, and that's how they read it, out in the world. They still exist on standing stones. So I used this tree alphabet to create a new, updated Irish tree alphabet. And then we had some dancers come in, the local refugee community. It was amazing because this was really the first time people could come together. You still had to be masked and socially distanced, but they created this, when they're not professional dancers, but they worked with the alphabet, and it was like this almost spiritual. Oh, I don't have the photo of them all. But it was kind of like this spiritual, very moving. They made a video of it. It was beautiful. But I couldn't be there myself because I couldn't travel. And then I wrote about it. So even though I'm not a writer, I have been trying to write using the alphabet to try and express some of this stuff. Oh, this is some of Ulysses translated into the Irish Free alphabet. It's just one paragraph. I have been hoping that I translate the entirety of Ulysses. I hoped I would have done that for the 100th anniversary. Stay tuned, everybody. But again, you can read it if you're that way inclined. But there were questions of, well, how should it be? Should that translation be printed in book form like this? Should it be on large sheets? Should it be on a scroll? Oh, and then this was the wildflower alphabet from New York City. Another early COVID project. So I was lucky enough that Patrick Over, who's the seed collector for New York City, we were speaking on the phone, and he thought I was going to use tree seeds to share for this project on Staten Island. And Patrick immediately said, it's too difficult working with tree seeds. It's really hard and long and complicated. What would be really cool is to have a wildflower alphabet, and then you can have wildflower seeds, and then people can just sprinkle the stories and plant that way. As soon as he said it, I said, that's beautiful. I've got to make a wildflower alphabet, but it's so much work. How can I possibly do it? Well, I did it. But it doesn't exist in the same way. There's no font for this alphabet, unfortunately. There were just these limited packet of seeds for the letters LOVE. So you could sprinkle love with seeds from these. And then this whole other series, which is separate, it's not the wildflower alphabet. It's kind of related. This was just English written, I think. And then I thought I'd include some photos because most of my time these days, like for years I've just been doing this, that's me in the middle. Campaigning, protesting. Oh, and then this is Andrea Bowers, great artist who's also in the book. This is what I do most of the time. So this was all before. And this one's interesting because it's the forestry situation in Ireland. Right, we have Cuilcha, which is the Forestry Commission. Government's supposed to take care of forests, but the reality is they're just plantations. So it again comes back to language. Who owns language? Who's using it to communicate what? So they say they're protecting forests, but they're essentially just planting plantations, because they're cash crops, they're monocrops, and they're completely destroying communities. And so it's up to community groups to come out and say no. And so then I thought this was very interesting. You have the difference between, this is the Irish poster, and then this was on the Brooklyn Bridge. So it's a bit more direct. But this was before, I don't know if you've all seen this horrific news that the new regime wants to, and then that's the book, different editions of the book, but they want to chop down, log, the size of California 3 times over to solve all the problems. It's completely horrific and disgusting. So it's all up to us people to come together and stand up and say, no, we can't do that. We can't do this. Meanwhile, so in a lot of ways, the book and these projects are about really dark, difficult topics like the Anthropocene and the fact that our species has trashed essentially this beautiful planet, and we are teetering on the edge of annihilation. And so this is really hard and difficult stuff, but hopefully it's very beautiful and positive and hopeful and about the future that we are all imagining and creating ourselves, right? Because that's what it's all about, and that's where the stories come in and the offering. And I really do think it's about us coming together. It's so powerful. And that's why the book is full of a lot of different people, a lot of different stories, all translated into trees. There's, oh, I don't even know where. Well, it starts with an introduction by Ross Gay. I don't know if you're all familiar with Ross Gay's work. If not, you're so in for a treat. He's the most incredible poet, writer, human being, gardener, community gardener, spirit. I just discovered his work. He's the only person in the book who I hadn't brought into it. My editor, my amazing editor, Maisie Cochran at Tin House, said, what about Ross? I went out and got every book I could to read and discover who is this guy. And he then offered to write the introduction. So really generous. And the whole book to me feels like it was just a family or a community, a real gift. People coming and sharing their words. And as I said before, I don't feel like these projects are finished. Like, it's not like this is the language of trees, this is the book, and it's over and out. It's all living, it's alive, it continues, conversations continue to grow between us, the creators and writers and artists who are in the book, but then also the people that I meet on the tour, people who get in touch with me afterwards. The fact that the font is, I don't know if I mentioned, but it's available to download for free, so anybody can write with trees. So you can all translate your own words. These are just some of the images of what it looks like. So Forest's home is in there. Amitav Ghosh. Some more trees. Oh, and the book, we planned this a long time ago, because in publishing things happen very slowly. So even though Tin House is a smaller indie publisher and they're very nimble, so this, in the speed of publishing, this book happened like lightning fast, so fast. But it's still slow. And we picked April 4th. We didn't pick. The big publisher, Norton, said the publication date would be April 4th of 2023. We were like, great. But it turned out that April 4th was also the day that a certain somebody was not incarcerated, arraigned for fingerprinting and all that stuff in Lower Manhattan, where the book, we had the book launch in the Elizabeth Street Garden. Here it was. So there were helicopters up above because this certain monster was doing all of that. And this was the McNally Jackson bookshop. So this was me in the morning because I had to go down to City Hall, the courthouse. So I was there with other members of Rise and Resist and other groups to show, our humanity and our protest. And then I had to go home and shower and switch my t-shirt up so that I had a different message. So I had this message. This is Georgia, who had a conversation with me at the opening. A radical imagination sets us free. And so then I have ecocide is suicide, love is power. Yesterday I wore remember the future. I think tomorrow I have love is power. Today I'm in white because the sun's shining, and I thought I'm going to be speaking so much at you, you don't also need a message here. But these t-shirts are an art project called We Will Not Be Silent. And so if anybody's interested in a t-shirt, you just go to this website. They're only like $16, and Laurie Arbiter's work. And I think it's super beautiful because, like, I don't know how you all feel, but I feel like I'm protesting all the time and having a message. Like, I'm protesting inside because I'm so upset and outraged and angry. But how do you make that visible? Because I have signs, a lot of signs, but I can't literally carry them around. So I find messages like this can be helpful. And they also start conversations. Some people will ask, like, well, what is ecocide? Or, for example. So this was the book tour, which was Amtrak. It was amazing. They have these little bedroom cabinet, I forget what they're called, roomettes. So I did the whole cross-country book tour on Amtrak. I want to make another book just so I can go on book tours. But I have to say it was really incredible to just travel the country. This was Atlanta, Georgia. So this guy, Peter, who came to my event because he saw it on social media, I think, and he invited me to stay in this treehouse that he built. So I got to spend 3 nights there in this, because Atlanta is a forest city. That was the reason I included Atlanta, was because of the Stop Cop City movement that was happening. I said I've got to go to Atlanta. And the conversations, everywhere I went, there were people who were working locally at different groups or had stories about trees or neighborhoods that were being affected, and it was always the same version of, or a different version of the same story, like in Ireland, where it's the government or the city officials who were coming in. Even Elizabeth Street Garden, where we had the book launch, they have the city now, Eric Adams is going to bring in bulldozers to remove all of the trees and their gardens to put in housing. They call it affordable housing, but the actual reality is there will be one little unit, and then they'll get rid of that after a couple of years because it's all corrupt. I hear a lot of people nodding in agreement. Oh no, you don't need me to tell you. This was a tree actually in Eureka, California. That was like over 1,000 years old, had been struck by lightning, but there was still life. Really incredible. And this was in Portland, Oregon. I think one of my favorite stops on the whole book tour. So it reminded me, because I was walking in Ursula K. Le Guin's footsteps. Her son Theo had very generously shared some of Ursula's favorite walks, so I include her, the word for world is forest, in the book. And this was in the park, what's the park called? The famous park. But I feel like this tree just shows like the whole world is right in there. And that's the tree house. The book, that was the UK edition. Oh, and then this was the book tour at the Irish Museum of Art in Dublin. Christina Kennedy. Very different kind of a landscaping and garden. And then this is our Irish Atlantic rainforest. So this was Owen Dalton invited me, so you can see we've got like an oak sapling growing on the trees and all of the epiphytes. So this is in West Cork in Ireland. The lost Atlantic rainforests that we had completely forgotten as a culture. And now, thanks to Owen and other people, we're remembering and bringing them back. And then this is, I thought I'd end with some optimism and positivity. So this was the climate march, maybe in 2002, yeah, because I had COVID. So, I had long COVID. I wasn't going to a march with COVID. So this was, I brought my sign with the forest drawing. I was trying to remember what was on the back side of my sign. So it says, what if forests have rights? As many people said, but they do have rights. And I was like, yeah, that's kind of the point. And it's interesting when you make a sign for a protest. You have to think carefully about the words that you use and what is the message that you're going to convey. Will it be read the right way? And now, I can't remember what was on the other side. But anyway, so this was the Rights of Nature contingent that was there at the climate march. And I got to meet Bill McKibben, which is the first time I met him in real life. That was amazing. He's just done such incredible work. But I really feel like this Rights of Nature movement is so powerful, sweeping the globe, and this is where I'll end, that Ireland is getting very close. I don't want to jinx anything. But we had a citizens' assembly. We spent a year and came up with recommendations for the Irish government. The Citizens' Assembly, which is just a collection of 100 random people selected from around the country, who were not invited, they were all brought together over a year, met with different industry, mostly industry people. So they heard all different sides of all of these arguments. And they gave over 100 recommendations to the government. The very first one being that there needs to be a referendum called on how the rights of nature is instituted in the Constitution. And it should have happened by now. We're still waiting, but there's a lot of pressure, a lot of great people working in these, local community groups, putting the pressure on to try and make it real. And I was just at a conference at NYU Law School 2 weeks ago on the rights of nature. People came from all over the world. It's really so inspiring to see the work that's happening. A lot of the rights of nature that has been successful so far is for rivers and water bodies and lakes, because somehow water is much more understandable and relatable to a lot of people. I mentioned in the book I had a conversation with Paul Polesland, who's a lawyer in London, about trees, because I would have thought that trees would be very accessible. It's obvious that we're so connected, we need trees. And just said somehow conceptually it's a little bit more complicated. But I do believe that we will have rights of nature for trees and forests and for all of these non-human beings that we couldn't live without. Right? We need them. This is what I say to my friends of Ardie Bog. I really believe that rights of nature is so important for our community locally. Some of the members are scared because the farmers are angry. They think if the bog has rights, then that means we don't have the right to dig the turf, which is something that they've had rights. This has gone down. Generations of families have turbery rights, it's called in Ireland, where you have the right to dig turf and to burn it in the winter to keep your family warm. And it's very local. These issues are very, very local, very contentious, but the fear and the anger is real. So you can't just come in and say, we need rights of nature, we need to give the bog rights. You need to really have conversations, and this came up again and again at the Sunday salons that we hosted, but also at the NYU Law School event, that you need to be local and have these radical listening sessions where people tell you what their fears are, what their needs are, and then this is what we all need on a species-wide level, right? We need to listen to each other and then have this understanding, because we're just trying to protect ourselves and our families. That's what it's all about. It's about love. And I totally believe that it's this love. That's why I love the Love is Power t-shirt that I have, because that's the power that we all have within us, that we love our families, our communities, and we'll do anything to protect them. And so that means coming together. And it was the reason I really wanted to have a forest on the cover, because I thought it shows the community that you can't just have trees individually on their own. Well, you can in tree alphabet, but what makes it really work is that they're connected, right, with the mycorrhizal network through their roots systems and above ground too. They're all community, and they're in community, they're connected, and if we could learn from the trees, we'd solve everything. And I really think we can do it. We're very close. And yeah, it's up to all of us. We have the power. I wish I could sing like Patti Smith, but I can't, so I'll stop. But it would be great if you have questions. If you don't, that's okay too. I can sign books. But again, thank you for inviting me to come to such a beautiful campus.
So where do you get the t-shirts?
We will not be silent. I don't get commissions or anything. Yeah.
Okay, we're going to take some questions. If everybody could please wait, because we want to get the question on the audio, on the camera. So if you can wait to ask the question until I get to you with the microphone. Okay, so somebody way in the back.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that wonderful talk. I have kind of two-part question. Because you said at the very beginning, that if, or in the introduction, that if you were a tree, you would be an oak. And so I want to know why. And then I want to know if that's your favorite tree, because maybe it's different. And if your favorite tree is different, what your favorite tree is and why.
Thanks. It's funny that they were two simple questions, but they've completely gone out of my head with COVID brain damage. But so it is.
Yes, absolutely.
Sorry.
So you said you would be an oak. So why is that?
So in Ireland, a lot of you probably know this, that oak trees are like the king of trees. In the OM, which, I didn't mention we have Brehon laws. This was a very rushed version of the talk. I realised I didn't mention the Brehon laws at all. So we had the OM alphabet, and then after OM was the Brehon laws, so that must have been like the 8th century. And the oak tree was at the top. So these laws were to protect the community. Again, it's rights of nature, but before we even had this concept. But to protect your community, it meant you had to protect the wider community, the non-humans. And so if anybody harmed trees, that was like the worst thing that you could do, apart from killing a human. And so the top tree would be an oak, and so the most intense fines were for people who harmed oak trees, and then you had the other like 7, 8, 10, 12 trees. And so those Brehon laws, and again, this is related to we need to remember, we knew back then how important it was to keep ourselves safe through protecting our habitat and our homes, which includes the non-humans and the trees. So the oak is also, so that was one way formally through these laws, but then it just, it's probably related to the myths, the fairy tales, the folklores, always include oak trees. And oak trees they're like the host species for hundreds, if not thousands of species live within an oak. So one oak tree could have 500-600 more species living within one tree. So it just feels like this mother tree in a way, which Suzanne Simard, who's also in the book, she talks about the mother tree. So yeah, oak trees just feel so gracious and giving. They're also, I think, super beautiful. They have these gorgeous canopies. A lot of them. We've got so many different varieties of oaks.
So it sounds like then that might also be your favorite tree.
No, my favorite tree, it's like with a favorite movie, it could change depending on the mood.
Fair enough. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Question?
Hello, thank you. I was just wondering what you saw and what struck you when you were out drawing on campus today.
Thanks. Well, obviously, the first thing I noticed was the weeping willow was just so bright, fluorescent green. And because in New York, the buds are only, some of them are like starting to appear, but they're still closed up tightly. We don't have any of that color. So yesterday on the train, the further south I came, more and more color started appearing. So this morning when I woke up, I opened the window, or the window was open through the night, and then the birds start singing, and I went outside and you've got green and life. So I like an advertisement, move to Virginia. I have to use the nebulizer because of the trees in bud. So I'm using the nebulizer in bed with the birds tweeting and the sunshine and the trees in the window. And I'm like, why don't we just live here? So that really struck me, just how spring is really unfurling here. But also the community, because I notice this a lot with myself, even though I am very focused on the trees. and the non-humans. I always will come back to the humans. So you'll notice the people who are there. So at one point, a little platoon of the little people who were, what ages are you when you're that size? They all came marching along, strapped on a string, and it was like the cutest thing in the world. So I think most of us kind of had to stop and look. Yeah. So I think it's all connected. You can't notice one thing without the other. The birds, I was tempted to take out my phone and use the Merlin app. That's why my battery died, because I did that after lunch. You got some nice, happy birds singing. I have a lot of sparrows outside my window and pigeons. They're pretty, but they get kind of boring. So it's lovely to have that diversity here. Yeah.
Is there an international, or perhaps it's multiple national organizations that are doing the best job to trying to help nature globally as well as in the United States?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, there's a lot of good people doing great work. The GARN, which is the Global Alliance for the Rights of Nature, is one of many. There were a few different ones for the rights of nature. I even read recently that CER, which is another one, I can't remember what that stands for, they sort of split, they had an argument about something. So no matter where you go, humans will still get in fights with each other. But I think, did you say globally?
And also locally, the ones that you know the best that are actually doing good work.
Yeah, I actually think that maybe at this moment that we're in right now, if you can support local, I think that makes a huge difference. Because I find that, even before what happened with the last election, working locally is very powerful and can make a difference. And I think it's just become more and more apparent with what's going on that obviously we have to be involved at national level and international level, but locally you can literally meet people, right, and you can go to meetings, or you can be involved yourself, you could join. And don't underestimate how powerful you are, honestly. Like if there isn't a group locally doing something that you think needs to be done, you just start doing it. Like, I went to Tesla on February 4th. I was the first person that we know of that protested Tesla. So I might not be allowed back in the country after I go to Europe, because Elon Musk has named our group by name, and now the FBI is investigating us as political domestic terrorists. Because I went to Tesla with the sign to say boycott Tesla. But it's powerful, right? That was just one person with the sign. So I think I'm not naming groups just because I think we all really come together. Because also where you are locally, I'm just repeating what I said earlier. You know the issues and you feel so passionately about it, and you have that knowledge, and then you meet others. And because you can meet, so it can be a social thing. So you can also turn it into a coffee morning or a walk. Go sit under the trees to talk and plan an action. Or I even went on my phone to see where's the local Tesla dealership in case I could come. It looks like you just have the superchargers in a basement of a car park. It didn't look very interesting. The other one, I kept going on the train towards Newport News. There's one there, and then there's one in Richmond. But that's separate. The Tesla thing is separate. I just feel like local issues.
Thank you.
Thank you for the great talk. But in November of last year, just a couple months ago, I took a beautiful couple weeks in Ireland, And I was on a tour much of the time. And we were going down a rather busy main highway, and the tour guide, director person said, you'll notice here that the road goes, and it goes around a tree.
Yeah.
And he said, it's a very special tree.
Uh-huh.
And I occasionally drive back and forth from Williamsburg to Richmond, and I notice how well we treat the trees there on 64. I was just wondering your opinion on the respect for trees here as opposed to Ireland.
Yeah, I love that you actually got to go on that road and around that tree. So that's a fairy tree. And Owen, I can't remember his surname, he was one of the campaigners. And again, it comes back to being a local issue where he knew, he said, this is a fairy tree, which means it's sacred. And this is where folklore and reality law meet. And Sinead Mercier, if anybody's interested in stuff like this, Sinead Mercier is a lawyer in Ireland who's written really beautiful, also humorous but very smart takes on this specific issue. And she did an art project with Sean, forgetting Sean's surname. They made this gorgeous book called The Men Who Eat Ring Forts. And it's, about the fact that they eat up the landscape. And the ring forts are these famous, historic, ancient monuments. And they would literally, so where I live in Ardee in Louth is very close to the Hill of Tara. And some of you might have heard of the Hill of Tara, which is the most sacred spot in Ireland. And a lot of mythology and stories that you could spend a long time reading about. Again, the government came along and said, we're going to build a road here. And Sinead, anyway, has done great work documenting and covering this story. But Owen, and I'm sorry I can't remember his name, it mightn't even be Owen, something begins with E. But he was successful in his mission to say, this tree is sacred, you can't chop it down for your road, it'll cause bad luck. And everybody knows that it's true. The fairies will come and they'll wreak havoc. You have to take care and protect. So they have to bend the road around this tree. Yeah, so it's true. The fairies, you gotta take care of them.
On that note, we are at time, but the event is not over. We have coffee and tea and some treats out there.
Ooh.
And you can buy one of Katie's books, or if you already have it, you can bring it back through this way and she will sign it for you. And before we do that though, I just wanted to say thank you so much for making the trip here. And